Welcome to the Human Design Profiles, an entrepreneurship podcast. I'm your host, Chantel. I'm a 1-3 manifesting generator, small business strategist, and the author of the Aligned Action series of books for solo entrepreneurs. Thanks for joining us today on the show, which is an active learning experiment all about how we experience entrepreneurship as individuals through our human design. Each episode profiles a human design enthusiast / business owner who's here to share about how their personal profile lines influence their entrepreneurship journey, how they use what they know about their profile to set intentions, and how this shapes the decisions they make on a daily basis. Today, I'm connecting with Lisa, a productivity and accountability coach, founder of Positively Productive Systems, and host of the Positively Living podcast. She helps multitasking creatives and caregivers reduce overwhelm and boost productivity without burning out or sacrificing what they love. When she's not sharing how to simplify and stress less, you'll find her hanging out with her husband and kiddos traveling, watching movies and acting like a rock star, or hiding from the world with an iced coffee and a good book, probably trapped under a cat. Lisa has current certifications in time and stress management, life coaching, and positive psychology. She's helped hundreds of clients do less, live more, and breathe easier. Have a listen while today's guest, Lisa, a 6'2", shares her story while you read between the lines. So Lisa, would you say that you identify as an extrovert or an introvert? And how does that play into your 6'2" profile?
I am for sure on every assessment that I've ever done, way back from Myers-Briggs all the way to the present, definitely an extrovert. However, I always call myself an introvert compatible extrovert.
I like that terminology.
Yeah, and introverts really love me because I'm not too much. I read the room really well. And also, I like a lot of introvert things. I love coming back to my own time. I know that I get the energy from collaborative things like this conversation. I know that I like to externally process, but I also know when and how to do it, with whom. And I can also appreciate hanging out with introverts. I actually have a lot of clients who are introverts as such. So yeah, that's what I am. Extrovert, but introverts can hang with me.
Well, you're right that fits really well with the 6'2" of that need for reflection in your life. How does that show up in your business, that reflection piece?
Oh my goodness. In so many ways. Now, the fact that you have aligned action as your words, your focus, your mission, it's so similar to what I do as a productivity coach, in that I say that our number one productivity tool is self-awareness. It sounds easy, right? It's simple, not necessarily easy. It requires reflection. So I love to do that. I told you in the green room before we started that I really enjoyed the process of even asking myself these questions and thinking about where these connections are. And it's something that has always been part of me. I connect the dots, and I love to share that with others. And also, we talked about Gretchen Rubin, and I love the 4 tendencies, and I use that quite a bit with my clients because that really shows when you have specific expectations, how you're going to show up. And it translates brilliantly when you're designing habits. And I love to do it myself. I am a questioner. So yeah, reflection and curiosity have been high on my list with, I would say, both values and strengths and character strengths, as is humor for that matter. But I would say that reflection is something I've tended to across the course of my life, and in some particularly poignant, it was easy for me to say, moments in my life, turning points in my life, reflection is what helped me pivot, and really it set me on the path that I am right now. And it's literally what I do with my clients, is help them boost that curiosity and reflection. And what I love the most about it is it's compassionate, because the minute you're curious, you leave judgment at the door.
If we're thinking the 2 line as your more reflective side, the 6 line as your super curious side, the ability to switch between those two and alternate almost cyclically between those really takes on like a magic of its own, right?
Yeah, I like that.
You've mentioned Gretchen Rubin, you've mentioned a lot of other personality type kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
When did human design come into play?
You know, it's interesting because that was a later one. So let me, thinking in terms of where I began, I would say, of course, back in the corporate days, Myers-Briggs showed up. And then a little bit later after that, I learned about more of the technical ones like the disc profile, and I still enjoy those. But as I started to coach people more, okay, then we came across Gretchen Rubin, which I really appreciated. And then what I consider the modern iteration or current iteration of Myers Briggs would be like the 16 personalities. I started to explore those. And so earlier in my business and my coaching, and to give you a time frame, I think I'm on year 8 now. So earlier on, I began with those. But curiosity, of course, got the better of me. And I'm like, there must be more out there. And what do they do? I was lucky enough to work with a coach when I was working on my signature talks, stepping into my own as a speaker. And I learned one that I don't necessarily use in coaching, but I really appreciate, called How to Fascinate. And that's like how you show up, and other people will connect with you because you show up this way. And I think that may have been a lead into, oh, and guess what? Human design is this way. Now, in the interim, I also learned about via character strengths and also the big 5 personality types. And those are probably the ones I use the most now. And, they're high quality in terms of the fact that you're working with, actual character strengths. That's a different part of you. Personality can fluctuate, but your strengths and even your core values, although they can fluctuate, there's something I feel it's like deeply embedded in us. So then later on, as I was like, there's more ways for us to look at who we are, how we show up, what are they? And human design was one of them. And I have to say that I was a bit resistant because part of me wants to answer questions and not simply tell you where I began. But I'm also very open. My openness on the big 5 is, on the sliding scale is like probably it's high up there. So I was like, but you know what? Let's try this and let's continue to use it as a jumping off point for conversation. So yes, definitely later in the process, maybe in the last few years. But again, I believe it's one more tool in the toolbox.
I'm always curious about how the things we find out about ourselves in our human design charts, how they might mirror other things that we know about ourselves through some of the other systems. Is there
Yeah.
anything that you discovered that you found like, oh, I already knew this about myself, and then it was confirmed in the chart?
I think it was so interesting to me with the 6-2 of having this sort of life cycle or phases that really struck me, especially when I started doing the math. Nobody told me math was going to be involved, but no, I looked at like, my age and the things that I was doing at the ages of these guidelines that are given. So to clarify, my understanding being that the 6-2 up until age 30 is a lot of trial and error. And I'm like, that is so accurate. Operates as a 3. So that is so accurate. And around that time, I divorced. So lots of trial and error. And then from 30 to 50 is the reflective period. Now, and that can potentially mean, stepping back. And I would say that's fairly accurate. But during that time, there was, obviously there's a lot of other life demands. I was a caregiver for my mom, and it's a big part of what brings me here today to talk about productivity in a very compassionate and sustainable way. Because I know what it's like to be in survival mode. I know what it's like to burn out. And so a lot of times, just from a healing standpoint, I had to kind of go inward. And I just think it's really fascinating that it's during that time that this happened. But then also during this time, I shifted into, oh, I've learned lessons and I want to share it with others. But I did so tentatively. And now here I am, as we are recording this, on the cusp of age 54. And I'm like, it feels weird to me in a genuinely aw shucks kind of way, like, really? But I'm stepping into my role model phase. And sometimes I'm like, I can't quite believe it, but at the same time, I'm genuinely honored, and I have integrity as my highest core value, so I will not steer you wrong, at least not intentionally. And it's just really interesting too when you think about like age 50 is kind of being that turning point. That's also when I started my podcast, and I'm 4 years into it and over 200 episodes in, and it's really doing well. It's resonating with people and it fills my heart. So it's like, it's an uncanny parallel to the phases that are described. And I'm excited for what's next.
Right. It's like you're following it to a T. Like, you could have started a podcast before 50. Why not? But it's like it,
Right?
it wound up
But I was
right. Right.
hesitant, which is so interesting.
Super interesting. I know.
Yeah.
I have talked to lots of 6-2s on the show because it is one of the more common profiles. But I think you might be the first, no, second person I've spoken to on the show who's on the third phase. Most of the experiences have been shared for people who are in their second phase only. But you do have that experience and that wisdom. And it's fascinating to hear about how that's shown up for you, especially in embodying your messages into your speaking. So I want to go back just briefly to the first phase of the 6. What was it like when you were focused on gathering all of the novel experiences?
So I think it was a mix of things. One is that I definitely felt a lot of uncertainty. And I think sometimes too, like it's the things that I now speak about, I now want to help people with is the don't feel the shame when you screw up. It's failure. It's a win or a learn, and maybe both, and not, failure and that you are a failure. Don't embody that. I stumbled through that
Yeah.
for sure, feeling all those things. I stumbled through, again, it all comes back to things that I want to share now of not feeling fully worthy and making choices that were safe or, maybe good enough, thinking that that was good enough for me and maybe not reaching further as a result. But not always. I mean, I did try some really interesting things. And I think if I were to describe it, and I love this question because I have never thought of it this way, is that it might have been a tug and pull between feeling unsure and feeling kind of green and maybe not worthy, and also having such a curiosity and a drive to try things that sometimes I just would anyhow, in spite of myself, and do things and be like, oh, wow, okay, that was interesting, or that was great. One of the best things I ever did was I became a voice talent for a while,
Mhm.
just because I was listening to people and I'm like, I could do that. And I did. I mean, it took a little bit of doing, and I mean, I didn't take it too far, but yeah, it was a constant tug and pull, I think.
Sure. Yeah. As someone who is stuck with the 3 forever, I can understand and relate to that description, especially the surprise part. I feel that too. I resonated with that when you said it, that sometimes I surprise myself as well. I'll be into something before I realize I've even begun. Sometimes there's that sense of it.
Yeah. It's
And
almost like it drives you, right?
yeah, like it's so aligned that it didn't need your conscious intervention to be begun in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that for sure. So having this role model profile and now being like having gone on the roof and now coming off the roof again, incorporating all of that knowledge from everything that you've gained, that makes a lot of sense. The 6-2 profile becoming a coach.
Yeah.
How do you feel that you've incorporated some of these gifts from your human design profile into your business and into your work with your clients?
So I think that it's actually the choice that I made, and maybe, or the choice that was made for me, that coaching makes sense in combining that with coming into my own and saying, you know what? I do have experience. I do have something to say. I do have wisdom I want to share. When I do share it, people are really responding. I think it actually does have a connection to being a manifesting generator. Is I speak
Mhm.
a lot about living a very passionate, a very multi-passionate life, sometimes called multi-potentialite. Emily Wapnick of Putty Lake has mentioned that quite a bit. And then also, I mean, you think about Da Vinci as the original polymath, people who do have that natural curiosity and passion and want to explore things.
Mhm.
And one of the things I didn't mention, but also touches upon that initial stage of curiosity, is that sometimes the bounce around that I did made me feel less than. Because we live in a society that's very much, you decide something and you go with it and you stick with it, and it means you're loyal, and then you're going to master it. And these are the things that are going to happen. And if you don't, then you are flighty and maybe not loyal. And, there seems to be this impression. It's the whole have a career, have a calling, and it's always singular. And I lived a life of, I can't help but I want to try this now. I mean, people who are like, what if you had to quit your job, or what if you had to leave, or what if you were fired, or what if you had to start all over today? And I'm like, I got a list a mile long. Even though I have no plans to leave coaching at this point, I adore it. I adore this combination because it feeds my curiosity and variety. If someone were to say, we're going to have to hit the pause button and I need you to think about something else, I'd be like, okay, I got stuff. Right? So I think that it's that understanding, that acceptance, that saying, you know what, it's that authenticity part, right? And truly, not authenticity buzzword, but like, who are you really? What do you like? You are who you are. And if you show up that way with the confidence, that is a beautiful thing. You are worthy right from the minute you show up. It's not what you're doing, it's who you are. When you get that, it changes the game. So for me, I get to say, okay, it's almost like I've been through, like you said, been on the roof, come back down, and I'm like, I've been there, dude. Sit down. It's going to be okay. And I get to offer optimism and hope and encouragement. And then on the practical side, from the productivity side, then I share what are the small steps that you can take to get to that mindset of, yeah, this can work. It can
Mhm.
be this easy. It can be this simple. And also to get to that point of saying, okay, but I'm still going to try the thing and maybe I'll do it this way. And this is how it can best work in my life and with my personality. That's the path that I've taken. And this is where I am right now. And
Beautiful.
I love it.
Yeah, you touched on authenticity, worthiness, introspection, all of those things, which you've really fashioned beautifully into your work and what you do and
Yep.
how you share.
One area I just want to speak to is that for the longest time feeling like I love all these things and one of my favorite questions is, or my favorite comments really, is don't make me choose. As soon as someone's like, what's your favorite? I'm like, you mean my two favorites? Like and so being able to be a coach where I can take this myriad of experiences, right?
Mhm.
And bring those to the table has been so energizing and so just satisfying and so helpful to my clients. So I guess it's the encouragement that if you're listening to this and you're like, I do love many things, it's like they're not as disparate as you think. There are ways that you can bring them together. There are ways that they energize and encourage. One of my favorite things to say to my clients is that those things that you love that you think don't have anything to do with the things you must do actually have everything to do with it, because it's your energy management. It's how you show up. It's you as a person and your soul and nourishing you as a whole. And when you do that, the other things you have to do will be that much better for it. That's like a huge aha. And I just wanted to make sure that I shared that because that's what I get to do now.
Well, and
Okay.
I love that you use the word satisfying because that is
Mhm.
the self theme as a manifesting generator. We're looking for satisfaction. That's the goal.
Yeah. And that's
That's
what I
how
want
we
for
know
people too. Yeah. We
when
can
we're
all
feeling.
have. It was so wonderful to be able to be like, I loved all these things. At the time, it felt like a waste. And now it's not, because I'm bringing all that experience together and it's amazing.
That introspection piece, like the one line loves to learn, the two line also loves to reflect, and they both have this element of reflecting on self, reflecting
Mm.
on your own experiences, reflecting on how you felt, how you handled something, how you chose to approach something, how it went. Was it a failure or was it a learning experience? How would you categorize that, right?
How'd that work out for you?
Exactly. So, do you have any special practices that you like to use yourself to do that reflection? Is that something that you have systematized?
I love that question. As soon as you start talking systems, I get excited. Keeping in mind, of course, when we talk about processes and systems, they can be as simple as having a checklist or a set
Mhm.
of questions. And that's really what it's about. I would have to say that this is a great example, and I see this like in the profile of a gift that I've always had that I didn't even think about. Like I'm just a good reflector because I have the natural questioning of what went down, what did we think, I externally process with people. So there's a lot of encouragement that I would give to think about the way that feels right for you. Maybe you are a journaler. Maybe you do want to immediately hop on with your bestie and have a conversation. So that I feel needs flexibility. But the system itself is actually the process of making sure that you build in time after an event, after a conversation, after a meeting, after an experience, after you've learned something, to review your notes, to think about what happened, to do whatever it is that would allow you to reflect, whether it's journaling or conversation or maybe both. So it's really that. And then also the practice of asking yourself the questions of, what did I feel went right? What did I feel went wrong? I don't believe in right and wrong, but when you ask yourself that, then you can keep asking the questions of, well, why did you think that was wrong? Well, because I'm always, I have anxiety about social interaction and I'm always questioning, what I just said. Was that okay? Like, oh, so then maybe it wasn't as bad as you think. Do you even know me? Like, okay, fine. Interesting internal dialogue aside, it's asking the questions of, what just happened and what's the big takeaways. It's very simple questions, but then my favorite part to this is then saying, it's like the multiple whys after.
Mhm.
So you've asked a question and answered it, asked and answered, what more do you want from me? No, I want to know more. Go deeper. Why? And that can be great for if you feel like something just went off the rails. And it can also be great for something that you feel went really right, because either you are uncovering it and figuring out what the real potential issue is, and sometimes it could be mindset, and sometimes it can be, okay, it actually went wrong, and so what did we learn? What do we do next time? And then on the other side of things, it can be really digging into, oh, not only am I celebrating this and I'm savoring it and I have gratitude for it, but here's why. Because it feeds this value of mine. Because, oh, you make deeper connections that way. So systematize, I don't know. I love systems, but it's really more process, I guess, in this case. And the simplest of it is making that time and asking some basic questions.
Yeah, when you said simple questions, I thought, yes, simple questions, but also subtle and somewhat surprising answers sometimes that you can
Mm,
uncover with those
so
simple
true.
questions. Don't knock a simple question. Yeah,
No, simple
love
question and a simple
it.
follow-up question too.
If you're feeling ready, you and I will flow into that closing ritual that we do on the show. So I'm
That
holding the
sounds great.
6-2 cards created by Christina from Glow Glow Juice HD. You and I'll take a deep breath in together. Settle in. Here we are. And then we'll let that breath go. The card reads, I honor my need to seek truths and ground in those who I deeply trust. How can I make space for my personal quest today?
Would you repeat that, please?
Sure. I honor my need to seek truths and ground in those who I deeply trust. How can I make space for my personal quest today?
I love that. So, seeking truth, I think it's a very meta response, but I clarified the question. I wanted to make sure I heard the question correctly. And that's a big part of my path to seeking truth. It's also my path to understanding that it's my truth. And I love the idea of grounding in those whom I trust. It's funny, as a questioner, we learn that we often will question and do our own research, but part of research, and I do teach this to my clients as well, that can fast track things is when you find trusted resources. People, and you do this all the time where you're like, I know that you've been shopping at this place before. What's good? Or you've been to this restaurant. What's good? And when you trust someone, then you can move things quickly. And so I think today, the way that I can support that is by just appreciating the connections that I have, which I've been doing already, and reach out to a couple of people whom I trust, and maybe even think about some questions that I have, some directions that I want to take, and getting their take on it.
Yeah. It's interesting. A couple of two lines now have mentioned this aspect of hermiting where it's not completely alone necessarily. Like one
Yeah.
can hermit with one close trusted friend. That's part of the umbrella of the hermit. So it's a little bit of a two-line theme that you brought in there.
I love that actually, because the joke that I make, like, I have, my hubby, he's also a very good friend. And then I have my biz bestie and some really close people. I do,
Yeah.
it's the going deeper as opposed to wider kind of thing. But the joke that I often have with them is like, I can't handle people today, but you're not people.
Yeah. Oh, that's sweet. If people want to get in touch with you, where can they do that?
Thank you so much for asking. Positivelyproductive.com is my hub, so you can find everything there. Of course, you are listening to an awesome podcast, and if you want to hop right over to Positively Living, I'd be honored to spend time with you there. And if you want to have some ridiculous fun and laugh a lot, then Instagram is the place to hang out with me. That's positively_Lisa.